My father looked me in the eye when I was 19 and said, "You were my biggest mistake." Not in anger. Not in a moment he could later take back. He said it calmly, in the front hall of our family estate, while rain hit the windows behind me and my suitcase sat open on the marble floor. My stepmother, Lydia Ashford, stood beside him with one hand on his shoulder, as if she were comforting him for having to throw me away. My stepbrother Bennett leaned against the staircase, watching me like I was a fired employee instead of his sister. And my father, Conrad Ashford, the man whose name was carved into hospitals, senior homes, charity plaques, and glossy brochures across 3 states, did not blink. "You were my biggest mistake," he repeated. "And I should have corrected it years ago." That night, I lost my home, my tuition, my last name, my inheritance, and the last fragile belief that maybe, somewhere beneath all his pride, my father still loved me. All because I had asked one question no one in that house wanted answered. Why had the night log at one of our nursing homes been changed? 15 years later, I walked into an emergency hearing room, where that same man sat in a wheelchair, unable to lift his right hand, surrounded by lawyers, regulators, board members, reporters, and investors waiting to watch his company collapse. Ashford Care Estates was under investigation. Patients had been harmed. Records had vanished. Families were demanding answers. And the son my father chose over me was preparing to sell the entire company to a private fund that would bury the truth beneath paperwork, settlements, and silence. Then my father saw me, not as the daughter he threw away, not as the mistake he erased, but as the independent crisis investigator the state had brought in to decide whether Ashford Care Estates deserved to survive. His mouth opened once before any sound came out. Then, in a voice smaller than I remembered, he said, "Maren, I need your help." I placed my badge on the table. "Funny," I said. "The last time I stood in front of you, you needed someone to blame." The hearing room went silent. Everyone thought I had come back to save my father. They were wrong. I had come back for the people he failed. And before that hearing ended, one deleted night log would expose the lie that destroyed my life, and the family that built an empire on silence. Before I tell you how it all happened, tell me where you're listening from tonight. What city are you in? And what time is it there right now? Wherever you are, I hope this story reaches the part of you that still remembers what it felt like to be blamed for telling the truth. My name is Maren Ashford, or at least, that was the name I was born with. For the first 11 years of my life, I believed the Ashford name meant something good. My father owned Ashford Care Estates, a network of senior care homes that began with one renovated brick building my mother helped design before she died. The company's slogan was everywhere: "Dignity is not a luxury." My mother, Elise, died when I was 7. I remember her in fragments: lavender lotion, warm hands, and a soft voice telling me that old people should never be spoken to like children, because they had already survived more than we could imagine. When I was 10, my father married Lydia. Lydia was beautiful, controlled, and cold. She had a son from her first marriage, Bennett, 2 years older than me. He had my father's favorite qualities: confidence, charm, and a gift for making other people believe he had done more work than he had. Lydia understood my father quickly. He did not want to be loved as much as he wanted to be admired. And slowly, carefully, she turned me into the thing that disturbed his perfect image. If I cried, Lydia called me unstable. If I asked questions, I was disrespectful. If I missed my mother, I was manipulative. And if I cared too much about the residents at our care homes, she said I was performing compassion to make Bennett look bad. At Ashford House, our flagship senior home, there was Mrs. Eleanor Price, a former pianist who tapped Chopin on the armrest of her wheelchair when she was nervous. There was Miss June, who called me Little Lighthouse, because I visited on rainy afternoons and read to anyone who wanted company. Those people were not occupancy rates, liability risks, or revenue streams. They were people, and that was the first thing that made me dangerous in my father's house. When I was 19, I came home from my first semester, studying healthcare administration. My father let me intern at Ashford House for the summer, mostly because he thought it would teach me discipline. I wore a temporary staff badge that said Maren Ashford Administrative Trainee. Bennett joked that it was cute they gave me a pretend title, but I took it seriously. I shadowed nurses, filed incident reports, and learned how night logs became morning records. Within 2 weeks, I noticed something strange. The daytime records were clean, too clean. Every report used the same careful language. Every bruise was minor. Every fall was assisted. Every family had supposedly been notified. Then one night, I stayed late because Mrs. Price had been anxious during a thunderstorm. After she fell asleep, I walked toward the nurse's station to return a blanket. That was when I heard raised voices coming from the medication room. A nurse named Carla was arguing with the night supervisor. She hit her head, Carla whispered sharply. You can't write lowered safely to Matt. She was alone for 9 minutes. The supervisor answered, You want to keep your job? Then you write what the system allows. The next morning, Mrs. Price had a purple mark near her temple. When I asked what happened, the chart said she had slipped gently from a seated position and had no injury requiring family notification. But when I visited her, she gripped my wrist and whispered, They changed the night log. What night log? I asked. Her cloudy eyes filled with fear. The real one, she said. The one before morning. I should have gone straight to an outside regulator. But I was 19. I was still my father's daughter. I still believed there was a right way to bring truth into a family. So I printed the report, copied the medication delay sheet, wrote down the discrepancy, and asked my father for a private meeting. I never got one. Lydia found out first. By dinner that night, she was already seated beside my father, speaking in the soft wounded voice she used when preparing to destroy someone. Maren is struggling, she said. My father looked at me. With what? With boundaries, Lydia said. She has been frightening staff, accusing people of neglect, disturbing residents. That's not true, I said. Mrs. Price fell. The report was changed. Bennett laughed under his breath. Here we go. Lydia lowered her eyes. There's something else. She placed a folder on the table. Inside were screenshots of confidential internal records sent to an anonymous journalist. The timestamp showed they had been accessed from my trainee account. My body went cold. I didn't send these, I said. Bennett leaned forward. Then why is your login on them? I don't know. Lydia's voice trembled perfectly. I told you she was angry, Conrad. I told you she resented Bennett being brought into leadership training. But I never thought she would risk the company. I didn't, I said. Dad, check the timestamps. Check the device. Check who else had access. My father did not touch the folder. That was the moment I should have understood. He was not looking for the truth. He was looking for the version that hurt his pride the least. The next morning, Mrs. Price was transferred. Carla resigned. My badge stopped working. And by evening, my father called me to the front hall. My suitcase was already there. Lydia had packed it. I gave you my name, my father said. I was shaking. It was already my name. His eyes hardened. I gave you opportunities. I told the truth. You endangered everything I built. No, I said. Someone is changing records. Someone is hiding what happens at night. Please, Dad, just check. Lydia touched his sleeve. Conrad, she whispered. Don't let her do to you what grief did. That sentence changed his face. Because Lydia knew exactly where to cut. My father looked at me with something colder than anger. You were your mother's weakness, he said. And you became mine. I could barely breathe. Then he said it. You were my biggest mistake. I waited for him to regret it. He didn't. So I picked up the suitcase Lydia had packed, stepped out into the rain, and walked away from the house where my mother's portrait still hung in the west corridor, watching silently as her only child was erased. I spent the first night after my father threw me out in the waiting area of a bus station, sitting upright with my suitcase between my knees. By morning, my phone had stopped working. My tuition payment was canceled by noon. My student housing deposit bounced by 3. Bank account, locked. School portal, locked. Family email, locked. Health insurance, canceled. By sunset, I understood that being disowned was not a single event. It was a series of locked doors. Bennett left one voicemail telling me not to come home, not to call the facilities, and to disappear gracefully. I deleted it and walked until my feet blistered. For months, I survived on couches, rented rooms, hospital cafeteria shifts, and state regulation manuals I read until my eyes burned. I studied care regulations, medication rules, staffing standards, inspection procedures, and elder abuse statutes. I learned the difference between a mistake and a pattern, between negligence and fraud, between compassion used as branding and care, measured in minutes, records, and accountability. A changed night log was not a small thing. It was a doorway. If a fall could be softened into harmless language, a medication delay could be erased. If a bruise could be explained away, a family could be kept calm. If a staffing shortage could be hidden, investors could be reassured. And if a 19-year-old girl noticed too much, she could be turned into the scandal before the scandal became real. For the first year, I wanted my father to call. But the only thing that came was a certified letter from Ashford Family Council stating that I was prohibited from entering any Ashford Care Estates facility or contacting residents and staff. My father signed it. Not Lydia. Not Bennett. My father. That signature hurt more than the sentence. Because words can be thrown in anger. Signatures take time. By the second year, I stopped waiting. I changed my name professionally to Maren Cole, using my mother's maiden name. At first it was protection. Later it became freedom. I enrolled in night classes. I worked as a resident aide in a small nonprofit care home. It was not perfect, but it was honest. There, I learned what Ashford brochures never taught me. Care was not a slogan. Care was what happened when no one important was watching. Years passed. I earned my degree, then my certification, then my master's in healthcare compliance and patient safety. I became the person facilities called when they were afraid regulators would find what leadership had failed to fix. I did not protect companies. I protected facts. The first major case that brought me attention involved a luxury memory care center where fall reports were rewritten before morning. The language was almost identical to Ashford House. Assisted to floor. No apparent distress. Family updated. 3 phrases that can hide a world of harm. After that case, I gave a patient safety presentation called The Lies That Happened Before Morning. I did not mention Ashford. I never mentioned my father. But I talked about night logs, edited incident reports, and the way vulnerable people vanish inside language designed to protect institutions. A month later, I received my first state contract as an independent crisis investigator. By 34, I had built a career on the exact question that got me thrown out of my father's house. Who changed the record? And why? Then, one October morning, my phone rang. The caller was Dana Whitcomb from the State Office of Long-Term Care Accountability. "We're forming an emergency review panel," she said. "We need an external investigator with experience in record manipulation and overnight incident reporting." "Which company?" I asked. There was a pause. "Ashford Care Estates." My hand stopped moving. "There are allegations of systemic incident suppression, falsified family notifications, and improper transfer practices," she continued. "Your work was specifically recommended." "I need to disclose a conflict," I said. Dana waited. "My legal birth name is Maren Ashford. Conrad Ashford is my father." Another pause. "Longer this time? Would that prevent you from conducting an independent review?" "No," I said. "It won't prevent me." "Would it compromise your neutrality? People think neutrality means you have no history. Sometimes it means your history taught you exactly where not to look away." "No," I said. "But I won't protect the Ashford name." Dana was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Because of your history with Ashford, you would not work alone. Every interview would be recorded. Every finding would be reviewed by a 3-member oversight panel. You could lead the investigation, but you could not privately decide its outcome." "That's fine with me," I said. I did not need power without witnesses. I needed the record to survive. 24 hours later, I received the preliminary file. 3 unexplained deaths. 17 fall reports under review. 42 family notification discrepancies. Medication irregularities across 5 facilities. Staff intimidation complaints. And 1 pending sale to a private investment fund called North Meridian Health Capital. The proposed sale would transfer assets, restructure liability, and close 2 facilities within 90 days. One of them was Ashford House, the place where Mrs. Price had grabbed my wrist, the place where my life split in 2. On page 17 of the file, I saw a scanned internal memo from 15 years earlier. Overnight documentation variance. Price incident. My chest tightened. The memo had been flagged, then archived without action. And at the bottom, under executive review, was my father's name. Conrad Ashford. He had known there was a variance. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the whole scheme, but enough to ask questions. Enough to hesitate. Enough to choose. I printed the file, packed 1 black suit, and the old temporary badge I had kept for reasons I never admitted even to myself. The badge was scratched now. The Ashford logo was faded, but my name was still there. Maren Ashford. Administrative trainee. The mistake they forgot to destroy completely. The emergency hearing was held in a beige state building, where powerful people pretended not to be afraid. For 15 years, My father had existed in my mind as the man in the front hall, tall, cold, untouchable. The man who could erase a daughter without raising his voice. But the Conrad Ashford in the hearing room was smaller. He sat in a wheelchair near the end of the table, his right hand curled slightly against his lap. His hair had gone almost entirely white. The left side of his face seemed heavier, as if pride itself had suffered a stroke and never fully recovered. Lydia sat beside him in an ivory suit, still elegant, still composed, still wearing sorrow-like jewelry. Bennett stood near the window, speaking quietly to a lawyer. He saw me first. For half a second, he did not recognize me. Then his eyes sharpened. Maren? Lydia turned. Her face changed quickly. Surprise, fear, calculation, then warmth. Maren, she said softly. My goodness. I placed my folder on the table. Mrs. Ashford. Not Lydia. Not stepmother. Mrs. Ashford. Her mouth tightened almost invisibly. Bennett gave a short laugh. This has to be a joke. Dana Whitcomb entered behind me. Miss Cole has been appointed as independent lead investigator for the emergency review. Bennett looked at her. Cole? My professional name, I said. His smile returned, but now it had teeth. Convenient. No, I said. Necessary. My father had not spoken. He was staring at me, as if memory itself had walked into the room wearing a state badge. Bennett's position was simple. Ashford Care Estates had experienced documentation inconsistencies. The pending sale to North Meridian would protect residents, preserve jobs, and stabilize operations. It sounded clean. It sounded responsible. It sounded like a grave being described as landscaping. When Dana asked about the closing of Ashford House, Bennett said, "The building is outdated. Emotional attachment cannot dictate modern care strategy." I looked at him. Who is emotionally attached to it? He turned to me with a faint smirk. I imagine you are. No, I said. I'm asking because your closure plan transfers 86 residents across 4 counties within 90 days. 22 have dementia diagnoses. 9 are classified as high risk for transfer trauma. So I'm wondering whether your team assessed emotional attachment in clinical terms, or only financial ones. The smirk faded. Lydia spoke gently. Maren, no one here wants residents harmed. I turned to her. Then we agree on the only point that matters. My father's eyes moved from Lydia to me. It was the first time he looked almost proud. I hated that it still hurt. Dana asked whether Ashford leadership would consent to a full forensic review of incident reporting systems, including archived night logs, staff access credentials, transfer records, and executive communications. Bennett objected immediately. That scope is excessive. It is standard for allegations of systemic manipulation, I said. He leaned back. You would know. Yes, I said. I would. Lydia's voice softened. Given Miss Cole's personal history with this family, perhaps another investigator would appear more impartial. There it was. Not an attack. A suggestion. That was Lydia's gift. She did not shove knives. She placed them on the table and invited others to pick them up. Dana looked at me. Miss Cole disclosed her relationship before accepting the appointment. Her involvement was reviewed and approved under oversight due to the urgency and relevance of her expertise. Bennett laughed. Expertise? She was a teenage intern who fabricated concerns because she wanted attention. My father's head jerked slightly. For a second, I saw recognition on his face. He knew that sentence. He had heard it before. Maybe from Lydia. Maybe from Bennett. Maybe from himself. I opened my folder and slid one document across the table. This is not about what I said at 19, I said. This is about what your own system recorded 15 years ago. I continued. A memo regarding an overnight documentation variance involving Eleanor Price at Ashford House. It was flagged and archived. No corrective action recorded. Lydia went still. My father's left hand tightened against the armrest. Bennett glanced at the memo, then shrugged. Old issue. Irrelevant. Then you won't mind including archived night logs in the forensic review. He did not answer. The room understood. Sometimes silence is louder when the wrong person chooses it. Dana ordered a 48-hour preservation hold on all Ashford records. No deletion, no transfer. No sale-related data restructuring. No facility closures until preliminary review. Near the end, my father finally spoke. His voice was rough, dragged through illness and humiliation. Maren, Every pen in the room seemed to stop. I looked at him. He swallowed. I need your help. The sentence did not satisfy me. It did not heal me. But it landed somewhere old. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, funny. The last time I stood in front of you, you needed someone to blame. No one moved. My father looked down. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, Lydia spoke. This is not the time for old pain. I turned to her. That's the thing about old pain, Mrs. Ashford. When people bury it badly, it becomes evidence. After the hearing, I was escorted to a temporary review office inside Ashford Care headquarters. Dana also warned me that outside restructuring counsel had been brought in. If the North Meridian sale was blocked, the state needed another way to keep residents from being abandoned overnight. That meant the investigation would not be enough. We would need a rescue plan too. In the lobby, a receptionist handed me a new badge. Maren Cole, Independent Review Lead. I clipped it to my jacket. Then, without fully knowing why, I reached into my bag and touched the old badge hidden in the inside pocket. Maren Ashford. Administrative trainee. 2 names. 1 truth. I was about to walk toward the elevator when a voice behind me said, "Little lighthouse?" I froze. An elderly woman sat near the wall, wrapped in a blue cardigan, her silver hair pinned crookedly. "Miss June?" I whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. She held out her hand. "I knew you'd come back," she said. My throat tightened. "I didn't." She squeezed my fingers. "Eleanor said you would." The name hit me like a hand against my chest. "Mrs. Price?" Miss June nodded slowly. "Before she passed, she said, that girl saw the night. One day she'll bring morning." I could not speak. Miss June leaned closer. "They changed more than her log, Maren." "What do you mean?" "The copy," she whispered. "Carla kept a copy." "Carla?" "The nurse. The one who left. She said if anything happened, the real Knight would still be somewhere." "Where?" Miss June's grip tightened. "Not in the system they use now." Before she could say more, her niece returned and wheeled her away. I stood in the lobby with my new badge on my jacket and the old one in my pocket, feeling 15 years collapse into one sentence. Carla kept a copy. That meant the night log might still exist. Not the edited one. The real one. And if the real log existed, then somewhere, buried beneath years of corporate language and family lies, was the beginning of everything. Carla Reyes was not easy to find. The employee database listed her as resigned. No forwarding address. No exit interview. No HR notes beyond a single line. Voluntary separation, personal reasons. That phrase always means someone did not want the truth documented. I requested archived personnel files. Bennett's legal team delayed. I requested them again through the state preservation order. They produced a sanitized version with missing attachments, so I looked for dirt around the edges. Payroll tax records showed Carla had received a final payment 3 weeks after resignation. Not unusual. But the memo line read, "Consulting closure stipend." Nurses do not receive consulting closure stipends when they resign after an argument in a medication room. Then I found a scanned copy of an old staff schedule. Carla's emergency contact was listed as her sister, Ana Reyes, in Lake Haven. It took 4 calls to find Anna. When I introduced myself, she went silent. Then she said, "Are you calling for Ashford?" "No," I said. "I'm calling because I believe Carla tried to protect a resident named Eleanor Price." Anna breathed shakily. "My sister died 8 years ago. I'm sorry." She carried that place around like a stone in her chest, Anna said. "Whatever happened there, it never left her." "Did she keep records?" Anna did not answer. I waited. Finally she said, "You're Maren, aren't you?" "Yes." Anna agreed to meet. The next afternoon, she brought out a plastic storage bin sealed with gray tape. "Carla said if anyone ever came asking for Ashford House, they had to know 2 names, Anna said. Eleanor Price and Maren. My breath caught. She said anyone who knew both names was not looking for gossip. They were looking for the beginning. Inside were old notebooks, printed schedules, photocopied incident forms, a flash drive, and 1 envelope with my name written on it. Not Maren Ashford, just Maren. The note inside was short. "Maren, if you ever see this, I'm sorry. You were right. They changed the log. I tried to speak up after you left, but they made it clear I'd lose my license before they lost their funding. I kept copies because I couldn't keep my courage. Forgive me if you can. Use it if you must." Part of me wanted to be angry at Carla. She had known and left. But companies destroy frightened employees more easily than families admit. Carla had failed, but she had not forgotten. Back at the review office, my team imaged the flash drive. The files were old, messy, and partially corrupted. But enough remained. The night log from the Price incident showed that Mrs. Price had pressed her call button at 1:42 a.m. No response until 1:51. The assigned aide was covering another wing due to a staffing shortage. Mrs. Price attempted to stand alone, fell, and struck her head near the bed frame. Carla assessed her at 1:54 and recommended physician notification. The supervisor overrode the note at 3:12 a.m. By 6:30 a.m., the official incident report read, "Resident assisted safely to floor. No head impact observed. Family notification not required." My stomach turned. There it was. The sentence that had destroyed my life had been built on 9 erased minutes. But the files contained more. Staffing shortfalls, delayed medication logs, family notification discrepancies, internal emails warning that overnight documentation must align with external risk language. And then, buried in a folder labeled Executive, we found the memo. The one from 15 years ago. This version was complete. It had been sent to 3 people: the facility director, Lydia Ashford, and Conrad Ashford. My father had received the warning. He had received it before I was thrown out. For years, a small, foolish part of me had protected one possibility. Maybe he truly never knew. Maybe Lydia intercepted everything. Maybe Bennett manufactured the evidence so completely that my father had believed what any executive would believe. But the memo removed that mercy. He had known enough. Not everything, but enough. Enough to pause. Enough to ask. Enough to choose his daughter over the clean version of his company. Instead, he chose silence, then called silence discipline. The next morning I requested a private interview with Conrad Ashford. Lydia tried to attend. I refused. Bennett objected. Dana backed me. My father was brought into a small conference room with a recording device. Without Lydia beside him, he looked less like a patriarch and more like an old man left alone with his ghosts. I placed the memo in front of him. "Do you recognize this document?" He looked at it. His face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. "Yes," he said. "When did you first see it?" He was silent. "Mr. Ashford," I said, colder now, "when did you first see this memo?" His left hand trembled as he touched the page. 15 years ago. The room seemed to tilt. Before or after I was accused of leaking records? He closed his eyes. Before. A document can confirm a fact. A voice can reopen a wound. "Why didn't you investigate?" I asked. He swallowed. "Lydia said the memo was part of the material you had manipulated. She said you were creating a paper trail to justify your accusations. And you believed her." His eyes opened. I wanted to. That answer was worse than yes. "Why?" He looked down. "Because if you were right, then the company was not what I believed it was. And if the company was not what I believed it was..." His voice cracked. "Then I had failed your mother's memory." I stared at him. "So you protected my mother's memory by destroying her daughter?" He flinched. "Good. Let him." "I was wrong," he whispered. "No," I said. "Wrong is misreading a report. Wrong is missing a detail. You were afraid. You were proud. And you let Lydia turn your fear into my punishment." His eyes filled with tears. For a moment, the child in me reached toward him. The woman in me stayed seated. "I need to ask you something," I said. He nodded. "Did you ever look for me?" His tears stopped moving. That was answer enough. But I made him speak. "Did you?" He looked down. "No." The word landed quietly. A small word with 15 years inside it. "Why?" His mouth trembled. "Because I was afraid you would be innocent." I felt something in me go very still. "You weren't afraid I was guilty," I said. "You were afraid I wasn't." He covered his face with his left hand. I stood. At the door he said, "Maren." I stopped without turning. "I don't know how to ask you to forgive me." "Good," I said. "Don't start with the thing that helps you. Start with the truth that costs you." Then I walked out. Dana was waiting in the hallway. "Are you all right?" she asked. I almost said yes. Women like me become experts at yes. Instead, I said, "No." She nodded. "Do you need to step away?" I looked through the glass wall toward the office where my team was sorting years of harmed residents, frightened staff, edited logs, and buried warnings. Then I thought of Miss June, Mrs. Price, Carla, All the people who never had the luxury of stepping away from what Ashford had done. No, I said. I need the Bennett files. Bennett had grown up believing someone else would soften the consequence before it reached him. Lydia softened. My father paid. Lawyers cleaned. Employees absorbed. Residents endured. We found his fingerprints everywhere. Forwarded emails. Budget notes. Staffing reduction approvals. Performance bonuses tied to incident stability. Meeting summaries where clinical concerns were reframed as narrative risk. Narrative risk. Not resident risk. Not care risk. Narrative risk. The danger, to Bennett, was not that elderly people were falling, waiting, suffering, or being transferred like furniture. The danger was that someone might describe it accurately. Lydia's fingerprints were cleaner. She rarely wrote anything direct. She asked questions designed to create instructions without owning them. Can this be phrased less alarmingly? Would family notification create unnecessary distress? Please align language with our brand values. That was how Lydia laundered harm. Through softness. Through concern. Through beautiful words placed over ugly choices. The pending sale to North Meridian made everything urgent. If Bennett completed it, Ashford Care Estates would be gutted. Profitable facilities retained. Troubled ones closed. Records transferred into legal holding. Families pushed toward settlements. Staff laid off. Residents scattered. The truth would not disappear completely, but it would become expensive to reach. That is often enough. On the second evening of the review, Bennett came to my temporary office without an appointment. You've had your fun, he said. I looked up from a staffing matrix. I don't have fun with neglect investigations. He smiled like we were still in the old house, and I was still someone he could corner near the staircase. You know, I almost admired the reinvention. Maren Cole, patient safety hero. Very moving. Open the door, I said. His smile thinned. Still dramatic. Still documenting, I said, turning my laptop so he could see the active recording notice. His eyes flicked toward it. You think you're going to save them? He asked. These residents? These staff members? You think they'll thank you when facilities close because you made the company radioactive? I think they deserved not to be harmed for your quarterly metrics. He leaned over my desk. Dad built something massive. Do you know what scale requires? No, I said. Scale requires systems. You built cover. His face hardened. You were never meant for this family. There it was again. Different mouth. Same sentence. I stood slowly. You're right, I said. I was never meant for a family that needed elderly people to fall quietly. His hand slammed onto the desk. Then the door opened. Nathaniel Ward stepped in. Dana had brought him in as outside restructuring counsel after North Meridian began pressuring the board. I knew his reputation. Calm, precise, impossible to intimidate. He looked at Bennett's hand on my desk, then at me. Is Mr. Ashford interrupting the review? Bennett straightened. This is a family matter. Nathaniel's expression did not change. Then he's in the wrong building. Bennett left. Nathaniel turned to me. Dana asked me to coordinate with you on the sale freeze, he said. North Meridian is claiming delay damages. Bennett is using that to pressure the board. Can they force the sale? Not if the preservation order holds and the board accepts an alternative stabilization plan. Do we have one? Not yet. I looked at the stacks of files, staffing reports, closure projections, and the list of residents at risk of transfer trauma. Then we make one. For the next 36 hours, my team worked with Nathaniel's. We mapped every facility, resident acuity, staffing deficiencies, debt exposure, compliance risk, and leadership involvement. The picture was ugly, but not hopeless. 3 facilities were too dangerous to remain open without immediate state supervision. 2 could be stabilized with staffing intervention. 4 were financially sound but had documentation issues. Ashford House had a strong core staff and deep community ties. Its failures came from executive pressure, not local indifference. That mattered. Bad buildings can be repaired. Bad cultures must be removed. Nathaniel warned me that Bennett and Lydia would not need truth. They would need doubt. That night, 2 headlines appeared. Disowned Ashford daughter returns as state investigator. Revenge or reform. The leaks included details only family counsel would know. My disownment, the old accusation, and the claim that my father had protected the company from an unstable young woman. Unstable. That word followed women like smoke. For 1 hour, I let myself feel it. Then I asked Dana for a press room. The statement was brief. My personal history with Ashford Care Estates was disclosed before I accepted this appointment, I said. This review is not about family conflict. It is about residents who may have been harmed, staff who may have been pressured, and records that may have been altered. I will not litigate my childhood in the press. I will investigate the facts in the record. A reporter called out, "Are you trying to destroy your father's company?" "No," I said. "I am trying to find out whether my father's company destroyed the trust families placed in it." Another reporter asked, "Do you hate Conrad Ashford?" The room stilled. Then I answered, "Hate is not an investigative method." By evening, families began calling the state hotline. Former staff sent emails. Anonymous documents arrived. One message came from an address with no name. Subject: Bennett knew about transfer deaths. Attached were internal emails regarding a resident who died after being moved from one Ashford facility to another without proper medication continuity. Bennett's reply to the warning had been 6 words. "Keep this out of acquisition materials." I printed the email and stared at it. This was no longer about edited night logs. This was about a business model. At 7:12 p.m., Lydia requested a private meeting. I almost refused. Then I remembered that Lydia was most dangerous when other people spoke for her. So I said yes. She arrived in my office wearing pale gray, her grief face ready. "Maren," she said, "this has gone too far." I gestured to the chair. She sat. Then she looked at me with soft eyes and said, "You have every right to be angry." I almost laughed. There it was. The opening move of every skilled manipulator. Agree with the emotion, so you can redirect the fact. "This isn't about my anger," I said. "I'm concerned you're reopening wounds that could destroy what your father spent his life building." "No," I said. "I'm reopening records that your family spent years editing." Her expression cooled. "Your family too. You only remember that when there's liability." For the first time, Lydia's mask slipped. "You should have stayed gone," she said, quietly. Honestly, I turned my laptop slightly. The recording notice was on. Lydia looked at it, then back at me. A slow smile touched her mouth. "Careful, Maren," she said. "Recordings don't always prove what you think they prove." She stood to leave. At the door, she paused. "Your father is fragile. If this kills him, whatever truth you find will sit beside his grave with you." Then she walked out. That was Lydia's genius. She did not deny the harm. She handed you the burden of consequence and called it morality. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Nathaniel. "You don't have to answer tonight, but the board moved the sale vote up. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Tomorrow, Bennett would try to bury the company before the review reached its center. Tomorrow, Lydia would weaponize my father's weakness. Tomorrow, the board would choose between a clean sale and an ugly truth." So I opened the Bennett email file, the Carla archive, the transfer death records, the staffing matrices, and the original price night log. Then I began writing the report that would make my father need the mistake he had thrown away. The boardroom at Ashford Care headquarters had a wall of windows facing the city, and a table long enough to make compassion feel impractical. I arrived at 7:40 a.m. Bennett was already there, laughing quietly with 2 board members. Lydia sat beside my father, adjusting the blanket over his knees. Conrad looked pale, exhausted, smaller inside his suit. Nathaniel stood near the screen, arranging documents with the calm of a man who knew exactly how much damage paper could do when placed in the right order. The board chair, Everett Sloan, called the meeting to order. Bennett began. His presentation was polished, urgent, and morally hollow. The company faced existential threat. Regulatory uncertainty placed residents and staff at risk. North Meridian offered a responsible transition. Delaying the sale would be reckless. He used the word residents 9 times. He did not name one. Then Lydia spoke. "This company was born from Conrad's belief that aging should never mean abandonment," she said. "It pains me to see personal grievances cloud the mission he built. We must not let old wounds drive current decisions." "Old wounds." Again. Then Everett looked at me. "Miss Cole, you have requested time before the vote." "Yes," Bennett interrupted. "With respect, we are not here to relitigate preliminary allegations." "No," I said. "We're here to prevent you from selling the evidence." The room shifted. I stood and connected my laptop. My preliminary review covers 15 years of incident reporting across Ashford Care Estates, with emphasis on overnight documentation variance, family notification discrepancies, staffing ratios, and executive response patterns. The care risk findings are mine, I said. The restructuring pathway is Nathaniel's. The first slide appeared. Not a chart. A name. Eleanor Price. 15 years ago, Mrs. Price fell at Ashford House after a delayed call response during an understaffed overnight shift. The original night log documented a head impact and nurse recommendation for physician notification. The official incident report removed both. I clicked. 2 reports appeared side by side. Original. Edited. This variance was flagged internally and escalated to executive review. I clicked again. The memo appeared. Conrad's name. Lydia's name. The facility director. Lydia's face remained calm. Bennett's did not. This is ancient history, he said. No, I said. It is the first documented instance in the sample set where overnight harm was converted into low-risk language before morning reporting. Over the next 15 years, similar language patterns appear in multiple facilities. I showed the phrases. Assisted to floor. No apparent distress. Family updated. Narrative risk. Then I showed the resident outcomes behind them. Hospital transfers. Delayed diagnoses. Medication omissions. Repeat falls. Deaths. Following transfer. I moved to staffing. Budget reductions approved under Bennett Ashford's operational oversight correlate with increased overnight incident rates. Internal concerns were repeatedly reframed as communication issues rather than care failures. Bennett stood. That is a misleading interpretation. Nathaniel spoke before I could. Sit down, Bennett. Everyone looked at him. Nathaniel did not raise his voice. Unless you want the next slide to be your email about keeping a transfer death out of acquisition materials. Bennett sat. Lydia turned slightly toward my father. Conrad, you don't have to listen to this. For the first time, he moved his hand away from hers. It was small, almost nothing, but I saw it. So did she. I continued. The pending sale to North Meridian includes liability restructuring and closure plans that would transfer high-risk residents on an accelerated timeline. Based on current records, I believe the sale would obstruct ongoing review, increase resident harm, and protect executive interests over patient safety. Everett Sloan removed his glasses. Miss Cole, are you recommending the sale be rejected? Yes. Bennett slammed his palm on the table. Of course she is. This is revenge. I looked at him. No, Bennett. Revenge would have been letting you sell, letting the facilities collapse, letting our father take the blame, and watching you discover that private funds don't protect failed sons once the paperwork clears. His face flushed. This is not revenge, I said. This is intervention. Lydia's voice cut in. And what exactly do you propose? That you, after 15 years away, run a company you hate? No. I clicked to the final section. Suspend the sale. Remove Bennett from operations. Revoke Lydia's advisory access. Create a resident compensation fund. Stabilize safe facilities. Transition unsafe ones under supervision, and submit the entire company to external compliance oversight. Everett stared at the slide. That would be expensive. Yes. Possibly humiliating. Yes. Shareholders will resist. Yes. And if we don't do it? I looked at the board. Then you are not a care company. You are a liability structure with curtains. No one spoke. Then my father did. Would they survive? His voice was weak, but clear. Everett turned. Conrad? My father looked at me. The residents, he said. The staff. Would they survive your plan? I held his gaze. Some facilities would, some shouldn't. The company would shrink. The name would be damaged. But the people who can still be protected would have a chance. He nodded slowly. Then he turned to the board. When Elise and I opened the first Ashford house, she told me the building would only matter if people inside it were safer than they were before they entered. His voice trembled. Somewhere, I began protecting the building more than the people. Lydia went pale. Conrad, she whispered. He did not look at her. I received the price memo 15 years ago, he said. The room froze. Bennett's lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Ashford, I advise. No, my father said. I have taken advice for too long from people who benefited from my silence. His left hand gripped the table edge. My daughter brought concerns to me. I did not investigate them. I allowed myself to believe she was unstable, vindictive, disloyal, because that belief protected me from seeing what was happening inside my own company. His eyes found mine. I called her my biggest mistake. The sentence entered the room like a ghost. My father continued. But the mistake was mine. I felt every muscle in my body tighten, not because he said it, because some small part of me had waited 15 years to hear it, and I hated that hearing it still mattered. Lydia stood. "This is emotional coercion," she said sharply. "He is unwell." My father turned to her. "No, Lydia. I was unwell when I let you teach me which truths to avoid." There it was. For the first time, he named her. Lydia's face hardened into something no one in that room had seen before. "You would ruin yourself for her?" she asked. My father looked at me, then back at Lydia. "No," he said. "I ruined her for myself." Bennett stood again. "Enough. This family confession doesn't change the financial reality. North Meridian is the only viable offer." Nathaniel stepped forward. "It was." He placed a packet in front of Everett. "As of this morning, 2 nonprofit care consortiums and 1 hospital-affiliated elder care network have submitted conditional stabilization partnerships, contingent on the adoption of Miss Purpose, Cole's oversight plan and removal of conflicted leadership." Bennett's face went slack. Everett opened the packet. "This is real?" "Yes," Nathaniel said. "Less money up front, better care continuity, lower regulatory hostility, and far less chance of criminal exposure for board members who cooperate now." That last sentence did what morality alone could not. It gave cowards a self-interested reason to choose the right thing. The vote took 11 minutes. North Meridian sale rejected. Bennett suspended. Independent oversight approved. Lydia's advisory access revoked. Full cooperation with state review adopted. When the final vote was read, Bennett stared at my father with open hatred. "You chose her," he said. My father's answer was barely above a whisper. "No. I finally stopped choosing against her." Bennett grabbed his folder and walked out. Lydia remained seated, perfectly still. I began gathering my papers. My father said my name. Not Miss Cole. Not investigator. Maren. I stopped. He looked like he wanted to say 100 things. Only one came out. "Thank you." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Don't thank me yet. The truth is going to cost more than the sale." And I left him there, surrounded by the first honest wreckage of his life. The public collapse of Bennett Ashford happened 3 days later, not in a dramatic police raid. It happened through documents. That is how people like Bennett usually fall. Not by thunder. By timestamps. Once the board approved full cooperation, the walls inside Ashford Care Estates began to open. Staff who had been afraid to speak sent statements. Former employees came forward. Families shared voicemails. Deleted emails resurfaced with the stubbornness of truth that had waited long enough. The most damaging file came from Bennett's own assistant. Her name was Talia Monroe, 26, overworked, underpaid, and smart enough to know when loyalty had become self-harm. She requested whistleblower protection before handing over a folder labeled Acquisition Hygiene. Inside were emails between Bennett, Lydia, North Meridian Consultants, and internal counsel. Acquisition hygiene meant removing anything that might lower valuation. Open complaints, unresolved family disputes, staffing warnings, medication variance summaries, transfer trauma projections, and one especially ugly document, a list of residents at Ashford House marked high emotional resistance, low revenue efficiency. Miss June's name was on it. I stared at that phrase until the words blurred. High emotional resistance. They had turned loneliness into a category. They had turned attachment into an obstacle. They had turned people into friction. Lydia was harder to expose. She rarely wrote direct orders. But Talia's folder contained one recorded call from 18 months earlier. On the call, Bennett complained that facility staff were too sentimental about resident transfers. Lydia answered, "Then stop letting care people frame business decisions. They will always make suffering sound like an argument." That sentence showed her, not as the elegant wife, not as the concerned stepmother, as the architect of indifference. North Meridian withdrew its offer. Civil investigations expanded. Bennett tried to resign quietly. Lydia tried to present herself as a stabilizing wife. But the documents had already begun speaking. One afternoon, I visited Ashford House for the first time since I was 19. The building looked smaller. Or maybe I had become larger inside my own life. In the East Wing, an old piano sat near the window. Mrs. Price's piano. Or at least the one she used to play. The interim director said quietly, "We were told to remove it during renovation planning." Miss June cried for 2 days. "Don't remove it," I said. "It's out of tune." So was the company. At the end of the hall, Miss June waited in her wheelchair, wrapped in the same blue cardigan. "You came," she said. "I did. She looked past me toward the building. Are they closing us? Not if we can make it safe. Safe is good, she said. But don't make it pretty and empty. They always make things pretty right before they take them away. Before I left, she caught my sleeve. Did your father say sorry? He said he was wrong. Miss June nodded slowly. That's a hallway, not a room. I looked at her. She patted my hand. Don't move in too soon. I thought about that all the way back to headquarters. That's a hallway, not a room. My father had entered the hallway of accountability. He had not reached the room of repair. Not yet. Maybe never. That evening, he asked to see me at Ashford House. I almost refused. Then I agreed to 10 minutes, in the common room, with staff nearby. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are architecture. They tell pain where it may and may not go. We sat near the piano. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, Your mother loved this room. I know. She said the light made people kinder. Did it? He gave a small, broken laugh. Not enough. Silence again. Then he said, I don't expect you to forgive me. Good. He nodded. But I want to ask, what repair looks like, if forgiveness isn't the starting point. That was the first intelligent thing he had asked me in 15 years. I turned to him. Truth, I said. Consistently. Especially when it makes you look worse. He listened. Compensation. Real funds for residents and families harmed under your leadership. He closed his eyes briefly. Testimony, I continued. You tell investigators what you knew, when you knew it, and who influenced your decisions. You don't hide behind illness. You don't hide behind Lydia. You don't make Bennett the only villain. His jaw trembled. And publicly, I said, you stop saying mistakes were made. You say you made them. A tear slipped down his face. I can do that. I know, I said. The question is whether you will when lawyers tell you not to. He looked down. I was a coward, he said. I called it discipline, then leadership, then protecting the company. But it was cowardice. The room felt very still. Why me? I asked. He looked at me. Why was it so easy to throw me away? His face broke. Because you looked at me like your mother did, he said. Like you expected me to be better. Lydia looked at me like I already was. There it was. The rotten root. My father had chosen the woman who worshipped his image over the daughter who challenged his conscience. I stood. He looked startled. Maren, that's enough for today. I'm sorry. I heard you. Do you believe me? I looked at the old man in the wheelchair, the fallen founder. The father who had finally found words after the years when I needed them most. I believe you're sorry now, I said. I don't know yet what your sorrow is worth. Then I walked away. Sorrow is not payment. It is only proof that the debt has been noticed. If you're still listening, pause with me for a second. How is your heart today? Is it heavy, peaceful, angry, numb, or somewhere in between? Write one word if you want to. And if this story is touching an old place in you, I hope it reminds you that the truth you carried alone may still matter, even if the people who should have believed you were the last to admit it. 18 months later, Ashford Care Estates no longer looked like the empire my father had built. That was the point. 3 unsafe facilities had closed under supervised transition. Ashford House survived, not as a polished brand, but as a monitored trust with public staffing ratios, audited incident reports, and families notified in plain language. The old piano stayed. It was tuned in Mrs. Price's name. A small brass plaque was installed beside it, in memory of Eleanor Price, whose truth waited for morning. Carla Reyes's sister, Anna, attended the reopening. She brought a photograph of Carla in blue scrubs, smiling shyly at the camera. We placed it near the plaque. Would she be ashamed? Anna asked me. I looked at Carla's photo. She was afraid, I said. That's not the same thing. Bennett resigned under investigation. Lydia tried to describe herself as a stabilizing wife until the recording played. They will always make suffering sound like an argument. After that, even she had no beautiful sentence ready. My father testified against legal advice. He testified that he received the Price memo, failed to investigate, relied on Lydia's framing, ignored my pleas, and allowed the company's culture to prioritize reputation over residents. He did not say he was misled, without saying he chose to be. He did not say Bennett betrayed him, without saying he empowered Bennett. He did not say he lost a daughter. He said he threw one away. I watched the testimony from another room. When he said the sentence, his voice broke. I needed my child to be wrong so I could keep believing I was right. I turned off the screen after that. Not because it was unimportant. Because it was enough. My healing was quiet. It was signing the final resident protection order, and realizing my hand did not shake. It was walking through Ashford House without feeling 19. It was hearing a young aide correct a supervisor. "We don't use that language anymore." Say what happened. It was not forgiving my father. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was no longer organizing my life around his failure. That is freedom too. On the morning Ashford House reopened under the new trust model, Miss June insisted on speaking. No one could stop her. She rolled herself to the front, blue cardigan over her shoulders, silver hair pinned crookedly as always. "I live here," she said into the microphone. "So I get to say if it's better." People laughed softly. "It is," she said. "Not perfect. Don't trust perfect. Perfect is where people hide things." The room went silent. Then she looked at me. This girl was thrown away for telling the truth before she had proof. That happens too much. To daughters, to nurses, to old women, to anyone people think they can out-talk. My eyes burned. Miss June continued. "So, if you're listening, and someone calls you difficult because you remember what happened, don't let them rename your courage." For a second, I was 19 again, soaked from rain, holding a suitcase. And somewhere across 15 years, that girl heard Miss June. "Don't let them rename your courage." After the ceremony, my father asked to see the piano. He had not attended from the front. That was one of my conditions. No public image of reconciliation. No photograph of father and daughter restoring a legacy together. We stood beside the piano. For a long time, he looked at the plaque. "Eleanor Price," he said softly. "Yes, I should have known her name." "Yes." He accepted the answer. That was new. Before, my father treated correction like disrespect. Now he received it like medicine he had earned the bitterness of. Then he looked at me with wet eyes. "I don't know what I am to you now." That question could have been a trap if another person asked it. From him, it sounded like someone standing at the edge of a house he had burned, asking whether any doorway remained. I thought carefully before answering. "You are the man who failed me," I said. He closed his eyes. "And you are the man who finally told the truth about it." He opened them. "That's all? For now." He nodded, slowly, painfully. "For now is more than I deserve." I did not comfort him. I had spent enough of my life managing the emotions of people who hurt me. So I let him sit with it. Then he said, "You were never my mistake." The sentence I had once needed like air. There it was. 15 years late. I looked at him, and something strange happened. I did not feel the hunger I expected. I did not feel the little girl inside me rush forward begging to be held by those words. Instead, I felt quiet. Sad, yes, but quiet. "I know," I said. His face crumpled. Because he understood, the words mattered. But I no longer needed them to be true. I already knew. That was the miracle no one in that room saw. Not that my father apologized. Not that the company survived. Not that Bennett fell or Lydia was exposed or the night log finally spoke. The miracle was that by the time my father told me I was not a mistake, I had already built a life that proved it. On my last official day as independent review lead, I walked through Ashford House alone just before dawn. The night shift was ending. Morning staff were arriving. The hallway lights were soft. Somewhere, a resident laughed in a room nearby. At the nurse's station, a young aide was finishing the overnight log. I glanced at the screen. The note was plain. Resident attempted unassisted transfer at 2:14 a.m. Call light response delayed due to concurrent care need. No injury observed. Resident reassessed. Family notified. Staffing concern escalated. No softened language. No hidden gap. No beautiful lie. Just the truth. I stood there longer than I meant to. The aide looked nervous. "Is something wrong?" I smiled. "No," I said. "Something is right." Outside, morning spread slowly over the building. Not dramatic. Not golden like in movies. Just gray light becoming clearer by degrees. That was enough. If someone once called you dramatic or difficult because you remembered the truth, maybe this is your reminder. They can question your voice, but they cannot erase what happened. My father once said I was his biggest mistake. Years later I became his only hope, but I did not come back to prove he was wrong. I came back because Mrs. Price deserved a real record. Carla deserved not to have her fear be the end of her story. Miss June deserved a home that did not treat attachment like an inconvenience. Families deserved truth. Staff deserved protection. And the girl I used to be deserved to know that being thrown away by a powerful man did not make her disposable. The night they changed the log, they thought morning would never come. They were wrong. Morning came wearing my name,